But I want to go back to the content audit in the context of what you were talking about, because actually, and we didn't really talk about this too much before we got started, but getting on more podcasts is one of my goals for 2022. And, I've started pitching and I've gotten some yes, some no's, some maybes, some,
Crickets.
we're not accepting guests right now, crickets. And I just want to know, for some of your clients, if somebody that's thinking about, getting on podcast and incorporating this into their marketing strategy, how is that measurable? Is it always measurable, or is it kind of a guessing game until you can figure it out?
Yes, it's all of that.
To all of the above.
So I feel like in the early days, because I started back in 2017 pitching clients, and back then it was kind of like the heyday of guesting as it related to growing your email list. It was something that we measured on behalf of our clients. We would have them use pretty links to personalize the URLs so we could see how much traffic it generated. And then some of them would even want to tie it to their email provider to see like what amount of opt-ins and signups they were getting from podcast interviews. That has definitely shifted over the years because I think as podcast listenership has increased, it's a much bigger ask to have someone go from listening to you to go get a PDF, as an example. So showing up with that type of opt-in is just typically not going to convert. It needs to be like a really meaty type of opt-in. Two of our current clients right now, they have full on like video mini courses as their opt-in. So it's something robust that they are offering listeners. Now, when you have a podcast that you can tie it to, like your listeners to the Proffitt Podcast, if they like what they're hearing from me, they can just go hop over and listen to Go Pitch Yourself. So that is something that is somewhat measurable. Like, I don't know exactly where people heard me from, but I'll be able to look at the date that this interview goes live and see, was there a spike in my listenership and did I sustain that over time? So those two things are pretty measurable. The bookkeeper, the person who owns a bookkeeping agency, she guides people at the end of her interviews to schedule a discovery call. And one of the questions on there is, how did you hear about the agency? And so, yeah, she totally quantifies the number of discovery calls and then booked business from her interviews. So those are definitely quantifiable. The other things are not as measurable. Just your authority in the space. That's one that when new people come to you and they see that you've guested on other shows, that gives them a little bit of confidence in potentially hiring you or viewing you as the expert. And then, it's just this kind of like surround sound. That's what I call it. When you've done it long enough and you've guested on enough shows, you start getting invitations to speak at summits. You start getting invitations to be a guest on other people's shows. So it like snowballs eventually if you do it consistently. And some of those you can anecdotally ask, like, where did you hear me? But when they're hearing it from all different places, it's hard to quantify.
Yeah, but I love the idea of what you were saying. And the reason why I love this is because it incentivizes everyone to have a podcast. But I love the idea of Angie being like, hey, if you like what you're hearing, if you like the tips that I'm giving, if you like the strategies that I'm sharing, hop on over to our podcast. And the reason why I love this is because anybody that hears you is a podcast listener. And it's so much easier to convert a podcast listener to another podcast that is likely, like, we're in similar industries where even though we're in podcasting and content creation, we don't do the exact same thing. But it's like this, it's a parallel between what we do. And this is what I love about it's what I've always loved about podcasting is we raise everybody up. Is that something that you've always seen whenever you're guesting on a show or collaborating with someone?
Oh, yeah. Is that a lot of us are in this business and love podcasting because it is raising up the voices of people who may have otherwise not had a platform to share their voice. And there is beauty in that and synergy amongst the people that are helping do this. I mean, I'm in a Slack channel with 3 other agency owners, and we all do very similar things. And we message each other when we have challenges, when we want feedback, when we saw email conversions tanking last summer when the month of July, I was like, did literally every podcast host take the month off? Because like we were getting 0 responses, but they were too, which it really helped us all feel like, you know, we hadn't lost our footing in the game. So yeah, there's a lot of collaboration in the space, and I think that's